are critically important to our economy. Every year, nearly 2 million people fish our lakes and our streams, and close to 700,000 people hunt our fields and forests. Nationwide, the hunting and fishing industry is valued at $95.5 billion a year and brings in $14 billion in direct tax revenue. Mr. President?
The Senator's time has expired.
Okay. I can continue on. I see that Senator Thune is here. Is that correct? And I can continue when he's completed his words. Okay. Senator Thune.
Senator from Minnesota, how much time do you need? How much to finish it?
It's like about 5 minutes. That's why I thought I could wait.
Okay. All right. I thank the Senator from Minnesota. And
Senator from South Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there's an old political axiom that's attributed to Thomas Jefferson, more recently Gerald Ford, that says a government that is big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take it all away. Those words took on a whole new meaning this last week when we found out that the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Department, Kathleen Sebelius, was issuing new regulations with regard to the Health Care Act that passed last year that would apply to religious-affiliated universities, charities, and hospitals. And I think we have to remember exactly why it was that many of our forefathers came to this country in the first place. They came here, in many cases, because they were trying to get away from religious persecution in their homelands. And so they came to the United States with the desire to start anew and to assert that in this new government that they formed, that they would protect freedoms, basic freedoms like religious liberty. And so in the Declaration of Independence, they said we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among those are the right to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. And in order to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And so that was a foundational principle of our democracy. And it was enshrined when they wrote the Constitution in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, when they said that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It was the very first right that they enshrined in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the United States. That was the weight that they attached to the important issue of religious liberty. And it was consistent with the statement in the Declaration of Independence, where it says that those rights are endowed by our Creator. They aren't given to us by state. They aren't given to us by government. They are something that that are endowed by the Creator. The government is here to protect those rights. And so when this issue popped up on many people's radar screen, and of course it's been percolating out there for quite a while, but there had been an opportunity to weigh in and to provide comments, and a hope that the Department of Health and Human Services would come to the right conclusion and exempt religious-affiliated schools, hospitals, and charities, that wasn't going to be the case, and that they were going to require these very organizations to do something that violated their consciences and violated the teachings and the practices of their faith. And so many people across this country, we've all heard from them, have gotten very engaged on this issue, Mr. President, and it seems to me at least that there is a very simple answer to this, and that is that the administration could go back and revisit this issue and more broadly make this exemption not just about churches, which is where it is today, but also church schools, church hospitals, church universities. And it was interesting this morning, the Minority Leader in the Senate, Senator McConnell, was out here talking about this issue, and he mentioned that 1 out of 6 patients in America is treated at a Catholic hospital. Catholic Charities is the largest private provider of social services to poor children, families, and individuals in America. The Catholic Church runs the largest network of private schools in the country. And he goes on to say these institutions have thrived because they've been allowed to freely pursue their religious convictions in a country that until now respected their constitutional right to do so. And he went on to say in that statement that if the rights of some are not protected, the rights of all are in danger. And I think what has many of the churches across this country and many of the universities and many of the hospitals concerned about is that this is going to become the law. Now, the proponents of this particular, or is going to become a finalized regulation, the proponents of the regulation are saying that there's a year to comply with it. Well, Mr. President, I would submit to you that asking people in this country to check your principles at the door, not now, but a year from now, isn't really making any kind of an accommodation. This needs to be reversed. This is clearly a violation of the religious liberty, the protection and right that we have in the First Amendment of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, and I hope that the administration will do the right thing and acknowledge that they have made a mistake, that they have gone too far, that they have overreached, that they have treaded in an area that they shouldn't tread, and make this right. And the way to make this right is to reverse this decision. Now, some have argued, well, what is that going to mean? Does that mean that people in this country are not going to have access to contraceptive services? The answer to that is absolutely not. The contraception would be widely available. It's just that religious affiliated employers would not be forced to fund this coverage, which violates the tenets of their faith. And so it doesn't have anything to do with contraception. It doesn't have anything to do with that issue at all. What it has to do with, Mr. President, is the issue of religious liberty and whether or not we're going to respect that, or are we going to allow that to be eroded, and who knows where this goes next. The other point I would make, Mr. President, is that this is also, I think, an example of what happens when you get a government that is so big that it can give you everything you want, but also big enough to take it all away. There are a lot of people who, when this was debated, when the Affordable Care Act was debated, argued, myself included, that this would lead to government running more of our lives, making more decisions, intruding more, having more control, and making decisions with regard to people's health care. Well, I would submit that this is an example, and perhaps example number one, of that very fact. What we're seeing today now is the Affordable Care Act, as it gets implemented, you're giving more and more power to a federal government, and when you do that, when you get big government gets bigger and bigger, it has more latitude when it comes to running over the rights of ordinary Americans. This is a perfect example of that. I could go down the list of other regulations. I've come down here to the floor many times to talk about regulatory overreach, excessive regulations that go way beyond common sense, that don't deal with issues of public health and safety, but are simply regulations for regulation's sake. People have heard me come down here and talk about the Department of Labor's efforts now to regulate the young people who work on family farms and ranches, and the overly prescriptive way in which they are trying to keep young people from performing duties that they learn growing up, that they are trained to do, that they contribute to the overall success and prosperity of family farms and ranches. I mean, the Department of Labor's proposal right now would require young people, or I should say restrict young people, from working at elevations that are more than 6 feet, from working with farm animals that are more than 6 months old, from working around grain elevators or stockyards, or operating certain types of equipment. In fact, many pieces of equipment, types of equipment, that are fairly standard on farming operations. It strikes at the very heart of what makes a family farm and ranch operation tick. And it is an assault on the heartland of this country and the culture and values that have helped shape it and make it great. So this issue of regulatory overreach and big government is an issue, Mr. President, that I think is symbolized by this current debate. What we're having is a debate about the reach of government to where they can start coming up with regulations under the new health care law that clearly violate the religious liberty protections that are afforded for people in this country under the First Amendment, and which I think our founders, if they were around today, would find incredibly offensive. This is an affront and assault on those very liberties. It is an assault on our Bill of Rights, upon our Constitution, and it's something that the administration should walk back from and make right. They can do that very simply by just reversing this, or widening or broadening this exemption to cover religious-affiliated schools, universities, and charities, and they could do that right now. Now, I would hope that that would be the case. If it's not, there is legislation that's been proposed here. A number of my colleagues have already filed bills. In fact, Senator Blunt was down here earlier today and asked to call up an amendment that would address this issue. It was objected to. on the grounds that it's not related to the underlying bill, the highway bill. Well, if it's not related to the highway bill, then let's provide an opportunity for Congress to weigh in on this, because I can tell you one thing, the American people are weighing in on this. The Congress of the United States, as their representatives, needs to stand up for the American people and, more importantly, needs to defend the Constitution of the United States. And if the administration is going to take this step, and if the administration is not going to walk back from this, the Congress of the United States needs to be heard. And so there will be numerous attempts until that opportunity is presented by my colleagues and I to make sure that this wrong is fixed, is corrected, and that the religious liberties for which our founders came to this country and for which so many have fought and died over the years to defend are protected, and those rights that are enshrined in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, are protected for the American people. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I ask that the remaining remarks be included in the record in the same place as my original remarks.
Without objection.
Very good. Well, I was talking about the fishing and hunting industry and how important it is to the state of Minnesota, and how, in fact, every year nearly 2 million people fish our lakes and streams, and close to 700,000 people hunt our fields and forests. Nationwide, the hunting and fishing industry is valued at $95.5 billion a year, and it brings in $14 billion in revenue. Clean water is a fundamental pillar in supporting this economic sector and to protecting people against dangerous toxins like mercury. Minnesota has passed, as you know, Mr. President, some of the most stringent mercury rules in the country. In 2006, our state legislature passed laws requiring our largest power plants to cut mercury emissions 90% by 2015. The federal government is finally catching up and will publish a requirement in the coming days to make similar reductions by 2016. And yet, despite everything we've done to combat mercury pollution, we're still grappling with its consequences. A recent analysis of 25 years of data has found an unexpected rise in average mercury levels in northern pike and walleye from Minnesota lakes. After declining by 37% from 1982 to 1992, average mercury concentrations in these fish began to increase in the mid-1990s. During the last decade of that period, 1996 to 2006, average mercury concentrations increased 15%. These numbers make one of the clearest possible arguments for supporting federal protections, because we all have a stake in protecting the health of our fish and wildlife. And we can't do that if we can't keep dangerous toxins out of our air and water supply. This is important to our economy, but it's also important to maintaining a certain way of American life, a way of life that many of us grew up with, that we ought to be able to pass on to future generations. I grew up in a family, Mr. President, that valued the outdoors. I was 18 years old before I took any vacation that didn't involve a tent or a camper in one way or another. This didn't just start with my parents. My grandpa was an avid hunter and fisherman. He worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines in Ely, Minnesota. And you can imagine why, for him, hunting was his way of life. This was his way out. This is when he got above ground from those mines. It was something he loved to do. I want future generations of Minnesotans to be able to enjoy these same pastimes. I want them to be able to fish in clean waters, to hunt in abundant forests, and to camp out in our beautiful wilderness. But I also want them to know the same America that we know, an America that is innovative, that is forward-thinking, that is willing to come together and hammer out hard-won solutions to tough challenges. Nowhere is this more important than our quest to move America forward through smarter energy and environmental policies. I can't help but think this is our generation's version of the space race, an energy race. But the finish line won't be Neil Armstrong placing a flag on the moon. It'll be building a next generation of energy-efficient windows and doing it in northern Minnesota instead of in China. Or an electric car battery factory in Memphis, Tennessee, instead of Mumbai, India, or a wind turbine manufacturer in San Jose, California, instead of Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is my vision for an energy America that is energy independent, a stronger, more innovative America. And I know you all want the same thing. That's why I'm here on the floor today, because I know we can't continue to get by with piecemeal energy policies. We cannot play red light, green light with our tax incentives, as we're doing this year, and that is why we have to put them in place again. What we need now is a comprehensive national blueprint for energy policy in this country, a solution that preserves the integrity of our air, of our water and natural resources, that gives businesses the incentives to research and development new sources of energy, that invests in the next generation of American innovation. That is our challenge. It's not going to happen overnight, but I believe that we will get it done. We have before, we will do it again. And one way to start is to make sure that we extend these energy tax credits. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
We heard Senator Thune talking a short time ago about an Obama administration rule that would require all employers, including religious ones, to provide contraception as part of their health plans. On our primetime programming here on C-SPAN 2, we'll have a couple of events responding to the rule, one from the Catholic Students for Women's Health and another from the Catholic Information Center. That's here on C-SPAN 2 during primetime if the Senate is out. The Senate this afternoon voted to move forward with debate on a two-year, $109 billion surface transportation bill. The vote was 85 to 11. U.S. states reached a $25 billion deal today with the nation's biggest mortgage lenders. The deal requires 5 of the largest banks to reduce loans for about 1 million households at risk of foreclosure. And the lenders will also send checks of $2,000 to about 750,000 Americans who were improperly foreclosed upon. The banks will have 3 years to fulfill the terms of the deal. You can see President Obama's remarks about the settlement at 8 p.m. Eastern over on C-SPAN, followed by the Justice Department's press conference on the deal. The Senate had a couple of votes this afternoon, one confirming Kathy Ann Benchavango as a judge in the Southern District of California. And senators also voted to move forward with the debate on the surface transportation bill. A summary from Congressional Quarterly says that the finance portion would extend through fiscal 2015 excise taxes that finance the Highway Trust Fund, which pays for the bulk of federal surface transportation projects. The Pentagon is recommending to Congress that women be allowed to serve in more jobs closer to the front lines. You can see that Defense Department news conference from today in our overnight programming here on C-SPAN 2 and right now at cspan.org. As we wait for a senator to speak, an update on House and Senate negotiations on extending jobless benefits and a 2 percentage point cut in the payroll tax cut. Associated Press writes that the talks remain stalled today. Currently, the unemployed can get 99 weeks of benefits. Democrats are proposing a 6-week cut of that, and Republicans want to cut 20 weeks. And Democrats are rejecting efforts by House conservatives to require beneficiaries to enroll in GED classes or permit states to require drug tests as conditions of getting unemployment. The current extension of the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits expires on February 29th. You can go to our website to see past conference committee meetings on the payroll tax cut legislation at cspan.org/video library.